Welcome, everybody. I'm Hugh Massie, the Executive Chairman and founder of DNA Behaviour International. And today I'm delighted to be hosting another Behavioural Economics Today podcast. And in these podcasts, we're always endeavouring to address issues that are front and centre of how psychology and economics intersect. In particular, we're very focused on how people make decisions and what drives those decisions. And today I'm delighted to have with me Snehal Murudkar from Goldfriend Consulting. And Snehal has had an exceptional career working as a data scientist in some major organizational transformation projects centered on data and decision making. She's recently worked on projects at McKinsey, E-Trade, Fiserv, and is right there at the top of major corporations in addressing what is key to them functioning properly. And we're going to talk a lot today about data and how it influences decision making. So welcome, Snehal.
Thank you. That was very kind introduction, and it is my pleasure to be here with you. I have been following your work and very impressed with what you are doing. And a little bit about me. So I'm Snehal Murudkar, as you introduced me. I'm a founder and CEO of the Goldfriend Consulting, and I serve enterprises into data and AI transformations. Over the past decades, I actually had a great opportunity to work on enterprise data, cloud, AI transformations for the companies ranging from McKinsey, Morgan Stanley, E-Trade, Fiserv, Ultim Packaging, which was a great manufacturing company. And throughout my career, I worked on many different initiatives, taking everything from supply chain logistics and finance to enterprise scale transformation into data, cloud, and recently in AI. And what all in all of these experiences and all of these industries, what is the most common factor is that we are trying to help organizations to solve their complex problems, take these problems, make it simplify, and scale the solution for them to bring the measurable outcomes, measurable business outcomes. And so today my effort is the same. So with my company, Goldfriend Consulting, I'm serving the enterprises into data and AI, enabling them, providing them end-to-end solution from strategy and architecture to through the implementation, governance, strong governance, and the adoption of the AI, which ultimately going to make them understand the emphasis on the AI at the enterprise scale.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating because AI has become very quickly over the last 3 or 3.5 years such a big topic. It's not in many ways a completely new topic. There are people out there who always remind me, well, I've been doing AI for 20 years, but it's become a bigger topic. And I think that maybe just before we get into, some more specific issues, just describe what an enterprise project looks like, taking the McKinsey example, not going into anything that's confidential where you can't share, but I think what I want you to bring out is it's a multi-year engagement that's affecting every dimension of the business.
That's true. Throughout all these different organizations, when I work, and especially at the massive firm like McKinsey, w- what we see is there are various different business units which are directly or indirectly connected to each other with the one single source of truth, which is your enterprise data. And they all have like whatever their definitions for the customer adaptability or customer retention or the business performance. They all have their own understanding of the business data. So at the enterprise scale, what is important is that not just collecting. And one thing is that all of these organizations, they collect and they analyze and then they report on a massive amount of data. There are a lot of processes that are massaging this data. There are a lot of processes that are analyzing the data. And there are a lot of people and or business units that are reporting on this data. What is one thing that I've seen is most important thing is the communication strategy between the people to understand this data, to have a trust in this data, having a strong governance because there are many people are connected with this data, having a shared business understanding between these units, business units that are working day to day together, whether it is operations, whether it is sales, HR, or technology or finance. So these all of the units, when the bigger organization comes into picture, they are working together. Even though they're working on their priorities, they are connected together with the enterprise data.
Yeah, and I think it's, if you took the McKinsey example, and I'm maybe being very simple here, but if you've got the London office working on a banking and finance project, which they undoubtedly would do over there, with London being a big business center, and then the New York office, you want them singing off the same hymn sheets about data and banking and finance data, how it's interpreted, and what information is provided to the end client. And it would be very easy for that not to happen and therefore get incongruent results.
Which you said very dot spot on because this is the same thing that we did. And so in what I have learned and in my experience that the project, the initiative, the massive initiative, what we did is bringing all of this. So there was a fragmented data all over different business units or different regions to that per se. And it was very important for the compliance reason that we bring our ERP system together, which was a massive finance cloud transformation. And at the same time, when you touch my finance cloud transformation, you have to make sure your enterprise data is aligned with your ERP systems. So we had to bring together 350 to 400 plus internal plus external clients together plus our entire enterprise together to make this massive change, to bring our legacy systems to the newer systems. And that was the whole transformation of the entire company. So you can understand now, as you speaking about the talking about the languages of London or New York, it is very important that organizations follow the same standards. And that's where the ERP systems comes and your compliance so that your company stay in compliance with what they are and what they present to as an organization. And that is actually you hit the right point there that it is very important to have that congruency throughout the organization.
Yeah, and it's a massive investment
It
for the
is.
organization. And it's, I think, very easy for large organizations to get off track with data and people just to, accumulate loads of it and file it somewhere. And then it shows up in some way and someone goes and taps it for some purpose. And, potentially the wrong decision gets made if that data is wrong. And I think that really brings me to the really big question that we probably should sort out up front in our conversation now is with AI systems, large language models can go and read anything that they're allowed to go and read, right? If you set them free, they will read everything and try and make its own head or tail of what's there. And so I think where we're really getting to is the success of implementing AI and trusting AI comes down to data.
Yes, that is so important point about current technology. AI is extremely powerful. Google and Anthropic and OpenAI, they are coming with the latest models, which, as you said, are very powerful. They can read anything and anything, and that's why it is very important what your underlying data is. Because the powerful data you feed, the powerful your business outcome is going to be. If you feed garbage in, it's going to be a garbage out. So that is very important concept now because you need to have the trusted data. You need to have a strong governance around this data. And you need to have a shared business understanding between the different business unit that is using this data. Because if you take an example of customer retention or you take an example of operational efficiency, So sales or say technology or finance, they might have a different understanding of how their priorities are or how their applications are working with this data. And AI, once you start using the AI, you need to make sure that your underlying data is as powerful as what you are projecting that it is going to give you the output of what your goals are. So that is very important thing that people are facing now, that due to this fragmented data that has been created throughout over the years within these organizations, it is becoming a little difficult when I talk to organizations. Say, for example, if it is a banking industry, they have a various different business unit for their checking account, for their saving, their loans, or their instruments. So these different business units have this data, but then having the shared understanding to create their banking products, it is difficult because this data is very fragmented. There is no shared understanding between any of these business units. So AI needs this power from within of your enterprise data, or to the matter of the data that you're feeding to the AI.
Yeah, and I think that, if you break it down, the data needs to be accurate, and you
Exactly.
use that term single source of truth. So, if it's important that you know where somebody works and what job and tasks they do, you need to have that information properly recorded, because it could be in the same organization, which I've seen, there's three different records of that. And which one is right? Right. I mean, that's a very basic, a basic example. And I think that's true for a lot of banks. One that we've been working with, they know the name of the person and how much money they've got in deposit accounts, but the other information about them is spread all over the place.
That is correct. Yeah.
And depending on what Salesforce accounts and other data sources that you go to get the information, it's pretty messy stuff. And then, is it actually the right data that you need? So what's there could be accurate, but is actually the right data is another part. And then how accessible is the data? Because I think that people in organizations tend to put up walls. And everyone knows that data is important, but people have got different definitions of privacy or what their kingdom is versus somebody else. And that all becomes a problem that's got to be broken down, and someone's got to break that down.
That is so true. And policies in different regions are different. Their compliance, like GDPR in the Europe, and we have our SOC compliance, various FINRA rules. So they altogether, it is very important. And in my experience, I'll give an example how we capture the customers or vendors, and having their addresses and having their information stored. We had in one of the transformation that I did, it is in CRM system, it was captured differently. In the procurement department, it is captured differently. It is stored in the enterprise data differently. And that's where, like, when we were going through the transformation, we have to come together to consolidate all of this and to make sure that we are talking the same thing throughout, so that we understand our customer well. And you are so right about that, and that's where it is very important to have the shared business understanding.
Yeah, and I think someone at the top's got to set the rules for that, or at least set the agenda, and I always look at all these things maybe very simplistically, but it's got to come from the CEO to say that data is important, that we're going to have a single source of truth, and it's an investment, right? It's a key capital allocation to make sure it happens. And sometimes some heads need to be banged together to realize that this data is the banks or the organizations, not a division heads. Being brutal about it, because I think that there's the next question is, if we establish that AI really cannot function without data, and in a way, AI is just technology itself. It's the programming of the AI that's important. That's humans as well. We'll get to that part maybe a little way along, but we've got to have the right data. But then where does the data sit? And I think the what really brought me to you and got me interested at an even deeper level in this was, hearing about enterprise data warehouses. And I think for some people that might be considered not as relevant, but, with AI, but I think it's even more relevant.
It is. It is a single source of truth to your organization because what it is like the enterprise data actually connects the all your or the entire organization together. There are so your all the different business units are directly or indirectly connected with your enterprise data because they are integrated with your it could be your ERP system, your CRM system, or your operations or your technology. But all of these different functions of your business are connected together with the enterprise data. The enterprise data warehouse basically is a single source of truth, which is in my experience where I have implemented this transformation. When we went through finance cloud transformation and the data transformation, the enterprise data was at the core. And what important thing it was that not just the technology that we needed to invest, we needed to invest in the communication strategy with the people that we work with. So and that's why this enterprise data warehouse, when you're talking about this single source of truth with all of these people in your organization as well as external people that are connecting to this data, it becomes very um, important that your enterprise data is solid and it is trusted and it is governed to talk the same language within or outside of the company.
And the warehouse, like a physical warehouse, even though the enterprise data warehouse is going to be, in the cloud somewhere, it needs to be managed. And, you use the word governance, it needs governance and it needs, day-to-day management and processes to ensure that it's kept up to date and accurate. It doesn't really matter how big the business is. I think that's something that's important too.
It is. And to tell you the truth, in the projects that I have worked and the initiatives that we took upon, it we have spent a massive amount of time in governing the data because that is the most important factor for your compliance and for how people use this data within your organization or outside of your organization. Um, so your uh, RBAC or your role-based access or your attribute-based access, we literally actually went to the level of the attribute level of how this data is going to be used within the organization. So governance is one of the most important factor and it is connected with all of the employees within your organization, how each person is touching this data and how they are utilizing. So it is very important that the organization invest into the humans who are using this data. Technology, just like technology, the people are the most important factor along with this technology. And that's where all of these factors comes into picture. Your trusted data, the meaning of that data, the governance of that data. And as you said, we did actually spend a lot of time in the governing the data. That was the biggest factor when we went to the transformation.
And I think, look, a key reason to have centralized data in the enterprise data warehouse, get clean data, is ultimately to improve decision making. But just having good data, I don't think just means that the outcome of that is there's going to be good decision making.
And that is so true. The leadership team, the exec teams, they need to understand that just like how we invest into the technology, how we invest into the understanding what business outcomes we are going to get, they need to invest into the so we try to get around the metrics and we try to get around what our goals are. But to get the excellent business outcome, it is very important that we invest into people who are understanding this data. And the leadership has to have that communication strategy as a big umbrella for between just the technology and what your goals are.
Yeah, I think we're talking about in here the meaning of the data, and how is it interpreted, and different humans can interpret the same data differently. It's a topic that I call and have written about called behavioral variability. So, even if we have the same data and there's 10 people sitting around the table all looking at it and it's accurate and we know it's accurate, which helps, but the individual sitting around the table could still come up with different decisions about that data.
And that is true. That is very true.
Depending on their lens, and that's going to be some of that's systemic, biases in terms of our behavioral biases, but also there's random factors, in terms of how the data is laid out. And I think that gets to what you've been, saying to me at varying times about the meaning of the data and how's it laid out so that it's interpreted in a particular way.
And that is really key to that, because say for example we take the product performance. When you are talking about product performance or you're talking about any metrics related to that, the sales have one definition or the operations have their own definitions, technology comes with their own definitions, and then finance comes with their own definitions. And this was a true problem actually I faced when I went through various different organizations talking about whether I was in Morgan Stanley or I was at E-Trade or Pfizer or McKinsey and Company, or the manufacturing company. It is one thing that is that always has been in within the organization, that various different business unit, they come up with their, because of their priorities. And what it is that the exec level or the leadership level, it is that's where it needs to start, that's where it needs to propagate throughout your organization, to create and invest into the people to understand the business meaning of what your data is. Because um, when the priorities are created and the metrics are laid down, the goals and everything is laid down, but the meaning is never propagated throughout from the leadership to the people. What happens is like everybody creates their priorities, everybody works on their own initiatives. But what remains apart from all of this is having a consensus on what they are achieving, having a consensus or on the goals they are achieving and the data that they are understanding underneath this. So say, for example, there is a major initiative going throughout the organization, then it needs to propagate through from the leadership to all the levels of your organization to understand the shared meaning of business. And they should know what the product is all about.
And if you leave it to people's imaginations too much, they'll interpret it a particular way. And, it doesn't take very many layers of communication down through an organization for there to be ultimately complete chaos. And I think what we're talking about here for the audience is a concept of semantic debt, which is, the build-up in a way of misinterpretations of data, misunderstandings that then cascade their way through the business. So the data that the organization started with might have been okay, right? Might have been clean, but in a way that can get, all that good work can get destroyed if you don't put in place uh, these interpretation layers, translation layers, how it's laid out, the way the information flows. You don't get that right, you end up with this semantic debt problem, which is equivalent, it might be worse actually than the technology debt issue that organizations have with lots of legacy debt, which is a cost and a blockage. The wrong data is going to lead to a lack of trust in decision making in the end.
That's what is the key, actually. That's what is like what is blocking many different initiatives around the AI, because organizations are solving this problem that we invested in a lot of technology. And throughout my career that I worked through supply chain, fintech, healthcare, or manufacturing, uh, what I see is like we have collected all the massive data. We have investment in done bigger investments in the technology, the latest cloud or AI. But what we have not invested in is having uh, the priority on the semantic debt. The technology debt is the semantic debt is equally important as a technology debt. And you're spot on about that because we invest in everything in technology. But if I would be happy if we initially, from the beginning, from the decades, we invested in the semantic debt.
I'll be a little more controversial than you, Snehal, and you can tell me if I'm going too far. But I think the semantic debt is a more costly problem
Yes.
for the organization than technology debt because the technology debt can be quantified and steps can be taken to solve a short term problem with that. But with the semantic debt, you may never know that there's the problem because data is invisible. Human behavior that goes with that is invisible, and therefore decisions are made inadvertently on completely the wrong data. And the outcome of that is significant. It's hard to put a price on it. And I think that's where, while leaders like to think ego wise that they're great decision makers, and some are, but if they're armed with the wrong data, then this is a catastrophe. And I think that's the semantic debt risk, and we need to invest in it.
And I agree with you because that is the most important. That's why I'm saying, like, from decades, I wish we invested more into equally well into the semantic than the tech. I mean, we invested into technology debt, and that's why we moved on from legacy systems to cloud and now to cloud through AI. So we are progressing in technology, but what we see is more mainly the semantic debt that is getting complicated.
Yeah, and
And
I think it's for some organizations, it's well, we need to get the technology stack right before we can deal with the data and decision making and all the other things. And that I think that might have been true once upon a time, but I think nowadays with data being so important, if not, it's the foundation of AI, and AI in a sense is technology. Both have got to be invested in equally, and brought along inside the organization with an equal commitment,
it is
um,
true. Yeah.
and not one before the other. And I think so often when I turn up at organizations, it's like, well, we just need to deal with our CRM and the tech, and our tech stack structure. But okay, fair enough. But you also need to deal with the data issue because otherwise you're just going, in the meantime, going to keep on making wrong decisions.
Yeah. And that's what is very important because, as I said, like, I wish we invested into semantic debt from the beginning than just the technology debt because there has been a lot of investment done in the technology, and which is fair because we need to move on from legacy systems to cloud and from cloud with cloud now the AI. Um, but they are going to be powerful only if your data is powerful.
And I think that the other point with semantic debt is, it's one thing for the raw data, if you want to call it that, to be clean, but the issue, around semantic debt is the understanding, is the documentation of how data should be interpreted. And I think it's good, in my mind, it's good for the listeners to this to understand that the semantic, the translation of the data and the policies and procedures in a way is data itself. And so it's data on data there. And so it's a vicious circle that's got to be put in order to.
And you said it very right because the trading company that I work it this is one of the very important factor for us that whatever we do we have to document every single thing so that your engineers, your leaders, or your managers understand the same language that we are putting into the technology.
Yeah.
So the documentation is one of the another key factor that I always practiced in my career. So even the recent example that I worked on one of the AI project for the healthcare industry, I began with defining what we are trying to do. I began with the proper documentation to explain what is the factor that we're looking here in the project and what is our business outcome. So uh, that is one of the important thing I feel that every organization needs to practice. That have a documentation that will give you a clear understanding of what is the product and what is the underlying definition of the goals that you are achieving with that product. So that every level, whether it is your C level, whether it is your VPs or directors or your engineering team or your finance team, understand what is happening with that particular product. So I mean, and that is one of the important thing that we practice in my career at least. My team always followed having a documentation around your engineering initiatives, because that is important thing. Otherwise, what happens is when you do not have any documented products, that it the chaos gets pretty fast propagated throughout your different business unit to understand what is going on, and they start creating their own meanings out of it.
Right. And that's then when you've really got an out of control organization
Yeah.
without realizing it. And I think that's what we're getting to here. And that's why the enterprise data warehouse is really the control point. If you're the CEO and the board of a company responsible for governance, you've got to have that.
Yeah.
But, but maybe if we get on to a new topic, and I think this is, again, a hidden part of all of this, and
hmm
you've alluded to it a few times around communication, human beings. But what's missing from a lot of the data sets that an organization has?
That's a very good question, and uh,
I
I have
want
been.
you to do my work for me. That's,
Oh yeah, no, actually, I have been following your work for a few years, uh, and what I learned from your work plus what my experience over the decade is, human factor is really important. The technology is important, the business is important, and the human sits right on the top of that is very important. Because I feel there needs to be a big investment done in understanding people, whether it is an employee understanding, whether it is a client understanding, or whether it is a technology understanding. It is very important that we understand the humans when they interact. The very good example is we were doing this massive transformation, and at that time, we had to communicate with 350 plus customers, and it was internal and external customers. And at that time, they had their own priorities. But what we were touching is the entire enterprise data, which was going to affect all of these customers. And they were not so customers. When I talk customers, these are the internal teams who are going to work on the changes that we were doing through this transformation, plus the external customers who are gonna get affected with this enterprise transformations that we were doing. And at that time, uh, it was very hard to bring everybody on board to emphasize that we are making this change. It is very important that uh, you have your deadlines, but you need to drop those and you need to focus on changing your systems to comply with the enterprise data changes that we are doing. And it was very difficult to have them on board at the beginning point of it. So I literally conducted health check calls every week for this, which is now I'm talking about the communication strategy. Every week to health check on each of these customers. There were more than 300 plus consumers attending these calls to get onboarded on what we are doing throughout the organization, because it was a massive initiative and they needed to understand. So we literally had every week health check calls, and during the production deployment we had everybody on board to test their systems, and then we conducted the testing every single week to make sure that, and we had a heat map to explain that are we doing this and who is falling behind, so to report them off of the heat map to let them know where you stand on this heat map, how important is for you to make changes, because once the whole system changes, whatever you're doing is not going to work. So you need to make the changes as per what the whole organization is changing for. So and to that is to the point that it is the communication strategy and making these people while transforming the technology, transforming these people, making them understanding what is happening. These are the key factors, and where the actually that's where the employee understanding or the client understanding, all of these needs to be a big part of your initiatives. And that's where I really enjoyed going through your work, and it that's what it fits, where I would say that layer would really work when people understand. And at the beginning, when any initiative starts, they create the whole plan and a strategy around their technology plus the people.
Right. In a way, there needs to be customized communication for each person, which comes from understanding their DNA style, which is what DNA behavior does. And then also by knowing that, you're also going to know their motivations, what appeals to each person. Uh, and then some people are creative and they can figure things out for themselves or have their way. And then it's others are extremely anchored and need a process or are cautious, or they think it's going to impact how they deal with a certain customer. And you need to be able to manage all of that to, get everybody onto the same page. So the communication is
Yeah.
important. But I think there's also an element here as well as, when you're dealing with massive customer bases and client bases, is understanding the behavior of all of the customers so that and this is an area I'm passionate about. It's one thing for an organization to have the financial, transactional, demographic data. That gets you so far. But what about the human? And I think, Snehal, the example I often use in my conversations is, there can be two families living in the same cul-de-sac. They're in their early 40s. They've got $1 million. They've got a home paid off and two kids. But banks and credit card companies and whoever else out there treat them all the same. But those people aren't the same. And how do the organizations recognize them as being different and appeal to them, in terms of communication style, maybe what their life preferences are? Because, one of those couples might be very social, the other, and like to do a lot of social things in their community. And then the other couple and family want to save all of their money and be more quiet for a lot of the year and are studious, but then go and spend it all on life experiences. That's very different people and different reasons for saving money or not saving money. But I think that the opportunity is there now if you've got an enterprise data warehouse to humanize all of the data.
Yeah, and that's where I can give you an example where the example you gave is that the two different people having the same situation of financials, but having a different mindset, which is actually a key in anything that you do, and whether that is you're taking a banking product or whether that is a trading product or day-to-day operations of any human being, it is very important to understand the mindset. So for example, like if your product is getting launched, it is very important to understand a different control group of your clients and your different personas. And that's where, like, whenever we have launched our products, it was very important initially to understand our client mindset, that what persona are we hitting, and if it is a group of female or if it is a group of male of a certain age, how the youngsters are doing, whether how there are 50 plus communities are working with this product. Or so taking a loan products that are out there, what would the person who's at the stage of starting his new family, what is his needs versus a student who is going to a college, what is the loan needs for the student. So all of this, understanding the persona and understanding the mindset of your client, which is very important. And in one of the digital banking products that when we were launching, we had done actually a lot of study on a client and a client personas. So to understand when this product is going to be out, how it was a banking product, about the notification about the fraud or low balance, or giving them the notification about the new products of the banks that are coming out. So we were launching that, and at that time, we basically tried to understand the different persona of the people. How would they react to this particular product.
You're on top of the idea of understanding the mindset of the client. And I think that till now, a lot of organizations have been limited in doing that to to basing that off demographic and financial information and making an inference that is what tells you about the person. Whereas I think now with AI and what we've developed, for example, at DNA Behavior with our digital scan product, for example, you can get to the psychometrics depth of the person, to understand more about their inherent values, communication style, motivations, that then will tell you more about the person than just what's in their bank account. And I think that's where data can really become a huge asset for an organization, particularly if you believe that, owning the client experience is what's going to drive an organization, or customer experience, what's going to drive the organization forward. Data and behavioral data are assets. And really, they should be booked on the balance sheet. If you're an accountant like I am, or was, should be
Yeah.
booked on the balance sheet as an asset. It's the value of the business.
It is a great value of the business, and it's the most important factor actually, because anytime that we work, and in my experience, basically, when I have worked through, we have created the whole line graph to understand what are we producing and how each business unit is going to interact with that data, and creating a different persona of each different department. Uh, and it is now when you're talking about the business unit, so it's a by the persona by the business unit. How would the operations work with this? How would the optimized department work with this? Or how will the procurement department would work with this data? So we had created literally a persona of the people interacting with the data.
And in a way, I think you're opening up the king hit point
Mm-hmm.
here that we've been unpacking. And sort of, I think in a way, Snehal, could be a concluding point is just knowing demographic information and transactional information and reporting that.
Mm-hmm.
That's historical. But if you can know more about the inner motivations of people
Mm-hmm.
and what they'll do, it becomes predictive.
It is, yeah, and that is another factor of the for the healthcare project. That they understanding the people mindset is very important to do the predictive analysis of how would they react to a certain healthcare product. So, not revealing the details, but it is important for whenever the healthcare product comes out. It is you have to create a different age groups, different health conditions, and the personas around that to understand how would they react with that particular product, healthcare product.
So as we wrap up today, and I want to leave the audience with one more thought, but today we've talked a lot about the importance of data to the future of AI and the successful future of AI, which I think we all want AI to be successful and trustworthy. And I think trust is the key thing. Enterprise data warehouses, applying or attributing the right meaning to data and documenting it, governance, humanizing data. We've got all the key elements there. The semantic debt is as bigger issue or bigger issue than technical debt or technological debt. But one thing that I think that should not be lost on anybody, particularly with AI, is it's the people behind the design of the AI is also important to understand, because that's a decision.
Yes. Yeah.
And how AI is designed, if that comes from one person, in a way, they're imputing their view and perspectives for everybody else to follow in terms of how decisions might get followed, how a product gets taken up, or what something actually means. You could be educating the world, right, through one lens. And I think that nothing should ever be forgotten that AI is programmed by humans. Even if it is AI programming AI, there is a human there somewhere, and that makes it behavioral.
It is true. It is true. And that's what I would say. Like, instead of isolating AI into any isolated use cases, it needs to be together with considering human factor. And what is the best asset for any organization is having the trusted data, having a strong governance around it, having the shared business meaning, and invest the same into a semantic along with the technology did. Because the powerful your data is going to be, the powerful AI can create the business outcomes for you. And that's the key. And this is going to help the leadership into the decision making, the right decision making for their organization. This is going to be very powerful for their decision making strategy, and also to any initiatives that needs to be started. This factor needs to be embedded at the beginning of any initiative.
Yeah, and it's with the right investment. So I think AI can be very powerful and successful if all of these steps are followed. But if one just treats AI as magic and that AI is going to get it right, that's also an even bigger problem. Um, that mindset's bigger problem than the semantic debt problem. I
Yeah,
think.
yeah, and one of the example I'll give you, I was doing my post graduation program with the UT Austin, and we did the 7 real world project. In that, the first most important factor is like curating your data, completely creating a very solid understanding of what your data is, and then understanding your persona, and then creating your AI product out of that. So as all throughout this our discussion as we spoke, it is very important that you have a trusted data, you have strong governance, you have shared business meaning, and your semantic debt is taken care of. Is going to give you the best outcomes, best decision making for leadership. And we are going to thrive in this AI era where AI is so powerful that it can read everything and anything that you have in your organization. So it is very important that you have the powerful data to create a powerful AI products.
And I think that's a great message, Snehal, to finish up on. And I just want to thank you. You know, you are, in my mind, a world authority on data and organizational transformation and powering AI. And in a way, you know, I think so far you're one of maybe the unsung heroes because everyone talks about, you know, Anthropic, but what's underneath Anthropic, you know? And you're one of the powerhouses that are going to drive the world forward the right way. I think that it can clearly only come from data. So thank you for participating, you know, with me today in the conversation. I really appreciate it. And I think that our audience is going to get a lot out of this in terms of what they need to do and be thinking about.
Thank you. I mean, it was my pleasure, and truly have a great pleasure talking to you. And these are really current topics. These are very important topics that people are trying to understand. And I've been following your and very much impressed with what you are doing at the DNA behavior. So it was truly a pleasure to talk about the behavioral science plus like understanding like the human factor and the data with it. So it was really great discussion with you. I truly enjoyed it.
So Snehal, just to wrap up, where should people find you if they want to find out more about you and your work? What's the best place for them to go?
So I have my website, goldfriendconsult.com, and my email address, which I can provide you. It is Snehal, my first name, Snehal .Murudkar, the last name, Murudkar at goldfriendconsult.com. Uh,
Fantastic.
so they can reach out to me there, and uh, I'll definitely answer or help them in their data and AI needs for their enterprise level initiatives.
There'll be plenty of them.
Yeah, great